What's up, YouTube? It's Kevin here, the migraine guy, back with another video in the What to Expect When You See a Doctor series. Today's doctor that I'll be describing is a migraine specialist. Now, of course, as a disclaimer, right, I've only seen this one migraine specialist. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush. Certainly, there are going to be different approaches from different doctors, but at the same time, I wanted to explain and kind of characterize the way that my particular doctor what his methodology was, what his approach was, and maybe if you've had a similar or different experience in the comments below, you could explain that to us so that we could have yet another perspective on how to hopefully prevent and reduce migraine intensity and frequency. So I went to see a migraine specialist a while ago. I guess I'll leave his name out. And so there are a couple things that you have to do before you even can get in, right? One of which is a lot of paperwork. Medical history, family history, etc. Drug history, sexual history, etc., 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 right? He wants the full picture of who you are as a biological creature, which makes sense. It's not at all a bad thing. It's probably somewhat common, too. In fact, I would assume that if you're going to see a migraine specialist who doesn't care about your medical history and genetic background, that's probably not going to be a good experience. So you got to do all the paperwork, mail that in. It took about, how long did it take? 2 months to get in to see this guy. It's just one doctor, a very small practice. And he only, I think he sees patients 4 days a week. So, you know, time's pretty limited in when you can get in to see him. So it took a while to get in. But once I got in, the next step was a pretty lengthy interview, like face-to-face interview with his head nurse, who took all of my paperwork, or I had mailed it in actually. So she had read over my paperwork and then went through it basically line by line with me. So this took about 30, 45 minutes. And the point was to kind of have me, you know, give verbal responses and be able to elaborate on any of the written responses that I had given in the surveys. And the point of this, I assume, was to maybe get more detail about any particular question that maybe is a red flag to them, or maybe my answer was indicative of something that needed more probing. Probably not the right verb to use at the doctor's office, probing, or gerund phrase. But that's what she did. That was kind of her role, was to get more information out than what was in the forms that I filled out to convey to the doctor before he came in. So after about 30, 45 minutes, the nurse leaves, hands off to the doctor, who they talk for a little bit, and then he comes in, and his approach was basically, he was pretty honest right up front. He said, you shouldn't expect today to solve anything. Basically, you need to think about getting the right medication, the right medication dosage, and the right medication frequency. You need to think about that as like a 2-year commitment with me. And I thought that was at least interesting, because the previous doctor, who I had been going to for about 4 to 6 months, was basically running me through different medications every 2 weeks. I would try something for 2 weeks, and either I would have, you know, a bad reaction to it, or it wouldn't work in those 2 weeks, and then we would just go down the list of medications that he wanted to try. And then migraine specialist said that that's a pretty bad approach. Maybe if you just get a migraine once or twice a year, that's a fine approach, because you're just going to give some triptan to him, Maxalt or something, to the patient, and that's all they're ever going to need for their migraines. And so his approach, just going down the list of medications, is fine for a normal person, but for someone who actually gets migraines frequently, this migraine doctor, this migraine specialist said, that's a pretty poor approach, which was nice, because I was pretty frustrated with the previous doctor. So what was this doctor's approach? Basically, he wanted to get me on a low dosage of a preventative migraine medication, Kepper. I can't remember the name of it. something with a K. And the idea was start with the lowest dosage, which I think he said was 250 milligrams, and take that every day for 2 weeks. Similar to the other doctor's frequency. But then he said, if you're not noticing a decrease either in intensity or frequency of the migraines, up the milligram dosage by double. So after 2 weeks, if 250 milligrams isn't working, take 500. If 2 weeks, if after 2 weeks 500 isn't working, take 750. After et cetera, all the way up to about 3,000 or 4,000, I think, is the acceptable daily dosage of this preventative migraine pill. Well, it's actually a anti-seizure medication, but it also works for migraines. And so that was his plan, and he said that is probably going to be a six-ish month process. And then if that doesn't work, once you hit the upper limit of the milligram dosage, then we can start thinking about a different preventative medication. In addition to that, he wanted me also to take melatonin to try and regulate my sleep. I do have a video on both of the things I just described, the melatonin and the Keppra, or whatever it's called, preventative migraine pill, the anti-seizure one. So if you want to hear how those pills actually worked out for me, you can check those videos. But he wanted to give me something to regulate. He wanted to give me something non-prescriptive to regulate my sleep. So he wanted melatonin in there. And he told me to start also, again, with the lowest possible dosage. I can only find 5 milligram pills at my grocery store. So I ended up like breaking them into quarters. So I'd only get 1.5-ish milligrams per pill because I'm pretty sensitive to melatonin. And he said, start low and then build up over time if it's not working. So that seemed to be his general approach, which I found interesting, is to take a few medications or a few pills, start very, very low, and over time build them up and see if somewhere in there, maybe it's 1,250 milligrams of the preventative migraine pill that seems to reduce the frequency, and maybe it's 2.5 milligrams of melatonin that helps me get a decent night's sleep, and maybe that overall is going to reduce migraine intensity and frequency by 50%, right? That would be awesome. That would have been awesome. Didn't happen, but that would have been awesome. So at least methodologically, that was his kind of his approach to it, was to try and find the sweet spot for different medications. I'm also going to do a video on the triptan that he prescribed to me, the abortive medication, the kind of medication you take to stop your migraine in its tracks, but you can't take it frequently. It was the brand name was Cambia, and when he prescribed it to me, he didn't actually prescribe it, he gave me a bunch of samples to try. But at the time he said that there wasn't a generic version, so I think it's a dissolvable powder, and I think he said per packet, it was like $50 a packet. So he gave me a bunch of samples first, and I'll do a video on Cambia also, just so you guys can know what if that's better or worse, or how I like the powder versus pill versus nasal spray. But that was his approach, was to try and start low dosage with various things and build them all up slowly over time, and then you stop when you notice that something has changed migraine-wise, hopefully for the better, right? So I don't know if that's how migraine specialist works for you, if that's the kind of approach that they take. If not, I would love to hear in the comments how your specialist works. I haven't been back to see this guy. The medications he did prescribe to me ended up making me feel so lethargic. If you watch those other videos on the medications, you'll hear the fuller story. But yeah, the Keppra it made me feel so lethargic, and right now I'm in graduate school, and so I just couldn't not read, I couldn't not work, I couldn't not teach, and that's exactly how Keppra made me feel. So I stopped taking it on the condition that, well, once summer clears up and I don't have coursework to do anymore, I can actually focus in and devote time to getting back on the medication horse and working with this guy's plan. So I'm probably going to start that in the next few weeks. I'll probably make a series about that. But yeah, that's what you can expect when you go to a migraine specialist. Catch you later, guys. What's up, YouTube? It's Kevin here, the migraine guy. Going to continue the series on what to expect when you go to see a doctor. Today's specific kind of doctor is going to be a neurologist. Uh, Now, I haven't seen a lot of neurologists. In fact, I've only seen the one about my migraines. So I'm obviously speaking from very limited experience. I'm not trying to paint all neurologists with the same brush that I'm going to describe the one I went to. But I assume that neurologists to some degree are going to have similarities in what they're looking for, some commonalities in their methodology. So as usual, if you have a different experience, please write it in the comments. Let us know what your experience was, if it was better or worse than how I'm going to describe mine. All that's very helpful. So here we go. So I got to see a neurologist after probably 4 to 6 months going to the general practitioner at the university clinic I went to. And the general practitioner, though he was trying to be helpful, was just kind of running down a list of medications and, giving those to me for 2 weeks at a time and then switching to a different medication when the previous one didn't work. And once we reached the bottom list of the medication, he just, kind of did the doctor's shrug. It's just like, well, I gave medication. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. That might be a bit of a caricature, but it's not too far off of his response. I'm not a big fan of that doctor. And so he said, sounds like you need to get in with the neurologist on campus. The guy that I saw came once every 2 weeks. He was visiting from the bigger city up the road. So I had to wait a bit to get in to see him, but I finally got in. So what can you expect when you get in to see a neurologist? Well, they're going to do, some simple tests with you, right? They're going to be touching your feet, they're going to be touching your arms, they're going to be doing resistance tests. They're going to have you walk in front of them to check for imbalances. See if there's anything that's an indicate, and this is the big thing, they're checking to see if they can justify to an insurance company paying for you to get an MRI, right? Because that's kind of the end-all be-all now, right? MRIs are the king of the scans, basically, especially with brain conditions. So if you exhibit any symptoms, right, like numbness on part of your body, maybe blocked vision in part of your visual field, and maybe when you walk, right, you kind of act like you're going to tip over to one side, those are indicators to some degree that there might be something wrong, right? There might be something wrong with your brain. And the migraine might just be a symptom of a worse underlying issue. So if they notice those things, then they can write up or their medical, what's the word? Their medical. There's a title for people who write up stuff for insurance companies. I can't remember what it is. Coder, medical coder, maybe. They can write it up so that the insurance company is seeing that there are symptoms that justify an MRI, because MRIs, are $1,500 to $2,500 per one, depending on how long you want it to be and how in depth you want the scan to get. And we all know insurance companies aren't super interested in helping people as much as they are in making money. So the neurologist's job is to see if what you exhibit behaviorally is worth the insurance company paying for the MRI. So of course, knowing this, if you went in to see a neurologist and kind of faked it in order to get an MRI because maybe you're highly concerned, I guess that's how you would do it. I certainly wouldn't endorse that kind of behavior, but that's the kind of things that they're looking for, which is important. Because, if you're like me, you go to the neurologist, right, which is a fancy kind of brain title, and you're thinking, like, I get really bad migraines, I'm seeing a neurologist, I must have a tumor. I mean, we all have family members probably that have had a brain tumor, and so you're like, oh, there's heredity, and I'm getting these symptoms, so it's got to be a brain tumor, life's over. Um, uh, the neurologist for me was very kind. He did all the examinations and stuff. Uh, and at the end of the day, he's like, "You're too healthy for the MRI. I can't justify it to the insurance company." He actually said this. He said 20 years ago, 30 years ago, his job was to try and help patients. He said now, today, his job is to be a salesman. He has to sell the justifiability of certain procedures for patients and to insurance companies. And he said, I just didn't have enough to sell. I was too healthy, which is great. You know, nobody wants a brain tumor, but he also didn't have an answer for the migraines. He looked at the medications that I had been through, saw that none of them had really put a dent in the frequency or intensity of the migraines. He took a look at kind of the notations that I had brought him of, you know, no changes in my dietary stuff, no changes in stress levels, no changes in this, that, and that, to show that there wasn't probably an environmental or contextual factor to my migraines. So at the end of the visit, he said, well, you don't exhibit any neurological problems that I can notice. You don't seem to have any environmental or contextual reasons to have sparked your migraines, and you have gone through nearly every medication I would prescribe. So what did he say to do? He said, well, you should get a sleep study done. A sleep study, which, granted, I know I don't sleep well, and sleeping well would probably help some of the migraines. But I've slept like crap for a long time, and I only, in the time frame that I saw the neurologist, had the migraines intensely for months now, but nothing else had changed, including sleep. So the idea of getting a sleep study to me seemed like an absurd thing to tell me. I was willing to do it, of course. Anything could potentially help. But it just seemed like such a BS way to end the meeting, right? You go there and, you know, he has his checklists. He goes through everything, and when nothing's left unchecked, he just passes it off to somebody else. Which I'm not blaming him. There's only so much anybody can do for anybody else. It just, for me, in my mind, I was like, God, this sucks, right? Like, you go to the neurologist, and that's kind of like the end-all, be-all doctor for brain issues, right? You're like, that's what you do, bro. You study the brain. And his answer was, well, go to someone else. So I never did get the sleep study done. The one offhanded comment he had was something like, well, if you have sleep apnea, then that could prevent you from getting good night's sleep, which might be the cause of your headaches. But like I said, you know, I've slept like crap for, you know, a decade, and only recently started getting the really intense migraines. So like, what changed to get the migraines to start now versus previously when nothing else had changed, including sleep? And he didn't have an answer, and so it just seemed like he had nothing to offer me. So I haven't gone back to see him because I don't have any reason to. But yeah, so when you go to see a neurologist, that's the kind of things you can expect. Just like when you go see your general practitioner, right, you want to make sure that you bring in like all of the answers to the questions he's going to want. So things about dietary changes, things about stress levels, things about sleep. That way you can paint an overall picture of your health for the doctor, and they can try to isolate any variables that they think are worth looking at. Yeah, so that's that. Nothing too fancy. And I guess catch you later, guys.